بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده أما بعد فقد قال الله عز وجل في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم حتى إذا استيأس الرسل وظنوا أنهم قد كذبوا جاءهم نصرنا فنجي من نشاء ولا يرد بأسنا عن القوم المجرمين صدق الله العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الأمي الكريم ونحن على ذلك لمن الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Most honorable elders, dear respected brothers, friends, my young and honorable mothers and sisters listening, in this ayah number 110 of Surah Yoosuf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions that the punishment that should have descended upon the people that disobeyed the prophets on earth and disbelieved in them and in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it came a time and a point when those prophets, they thought to themselves, according to the estimation that they had made as to when the punishment of Allah should come, they thought to themselves that they have been misguided by their mind and by their thoughts and by their understanding about the arrival of the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In this last week, we began by mentioning that it is possible for a prophet to assume that according to his understanding of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is and is going to do, he estimates a certain thing to happen at a certain time, and it is all possible that it could be wrong, and it does not go against their prophethood, and it does not go against their messengership. The fact that they are messengers and prophets, it's not a taint upon them to have a miscalculation and a wrong estimation. And we term this as ijtihad. That a Nabi makes ijtihad, a Rasul makes ijtihad, and he can be wrong in his ijtihad, and it is fine for him to be wrong in his estimation and in his assumption. It's okay. And then we spoke in quite much detail about mujtahid, about a muhaddith, and about a faqih last week. And I've been in a dilemma thinking that should I continue that topic this week, or should we talk more about this word kudhibu that is inside here. So I thought that I will mention one hadith more about this topic, just to give you understanding, because it's a very important part and aspect of our deen. And after that, we will discuss the two titans within the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'een who held different opinions in terms of this word in this ayah, kudhibu. And who were they? And how have the generations after them placed them in terms of being a muhaddith, being a faqih, and being a mufassir? And then based on that, the opinion that they give, which one has majority of the ulama taken in context of that, and that will then give us an understanding that if you have a mufassir and you have a muhaddith and you have a faqih, then in which matters should you take which one's opinion? So the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam has been narrated in Ibn Majah, and if I'm correct, you will find this in other books of hadith as well. And we have already said last week that one of the scholars, they stated that there are some ahadith in Ibn Majah which are even more sahih in the sanad, in the chain of narration, than those in Sahih Bukhari. So we have already said this. So if I say this hadith is from Ibn Majah, then it shouldn't ring bells in your mind. Oh, it's Ibn Majah. Oh, maybe it's a weak hadith, so whatever the Imam is going to say, in one ear, out the other ear. Astaghfirullah, we should not do that. The hadith is a hadith. And we have Siha Sitta, we have the 6 authentic books. Why? Because within them there are authentic hadith. Yeah, the grading of what is a sahih, every Imam had their own grading. But I'm not going to go into that detail again. We're going to go to the hadith in Sahih Ibn Majah. So the narrator narrates that in Hajjatul Wada', Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was by the point of Khayf. We have Masjid Khayf in Mina. He was there, and he stood amongst us and he said, Naddarallahu imra'an. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prolong the life, better the life of such a person whom sami'a maqalati, he hears what I say, فَبَلَّغَهَا, and he passes that information on to someone else. May Allah better the life of that person whom hears what I say, then he memorizes it, or she hears what I say and she memorizes it and then passes it on to someone. So does tabligh of this ilm, ballaghaha, does tabligh of this ilm, passes this ilm on. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam made a golden statement in that same speech, and he said, فَرُبَّ حَامِلِ فِقْهٍ غَيْرُ فَقِيهٍ. Many a times there will be people who will memorize Quran, ayats or hadiths. Many a time there will be people who will memorize these ayahs from the Quran or what I say, غَيْرُ فَقِيهٍ, but they will not have the understanding of these ayahs or the hadith. This is who? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And whom is he saying this amongst? The Sahaba radiyallahu anhum ajma'in. Lesson number 1. Amongst the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum ajma'in, there were categories as well. Those who were just hamil, who would just take the hadith, take the verses of the Quran, but they didn't have the fiqh, the faqahat, the level of understanding and insight to deduce rulings from them. But they were good memorizers. So their hifz and their memory was very good, but they didn't have the insight into the meanings, because this is a special level of intelligence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses to whom He wishes. Lesson number 1 from this part. So lesson number 1 from the Sahaba, they were different people, and lesson number 2 is that it doesn't mean that if I can relate 10 hadith to you, you say, Imam, tell us 20 hadith and we will call you a scholar. So I tell you 20 hadith off by heart. That doesn't make me a scholar. And it doesn't mean that if you also tomorrow come to me and say, Imam, you narrated a hadith, I think you got one wording wrong, because I also learned this hadith. I just was learning a few hadith off by heart, and I think you got this wording wrong. That doesn't make you a scholar either. That doesn't make you a muhaddith either. That doesn't make you a faqih either. That doesn't make you mufassir either. It's just you learned a piece of hadith, you learned it off by heart, you passed it on. فَرُبَّ حَامِلِ فِقْهٍ. There are so many people, many a times, who memorize pieces of knowledge, غَيْرُ فَقِيهٍ, but they don't have the insight to this. Then the next part of the hadith. So 2 lessons over there. Next part of the hadith. وَرُبَّ حَامِلِ فِقْهٍ إِلَى مَنْ هُوَ أَفْقَهُ مِنْهُ. And there are so many people whom memorize these and they end up passing it on to the people who understand them even better than the carriers of this knowledge. Because whom they are passing it on to, they are afqahu min, they are more faqih, and Allah has given them more insight than the ones who are already carrying it. So فَرُبَّ حَامِلِ فِقْهٍ وَرُبَّ حَامِلِ فِقْهٍ. So these people that are carrying it, they are faqihs. But when they pass it on to people, they are even greater faqihs than them. So they understand and deduce rulings from the nusus, from the Quran and the Hadith, to that level and extent that even the faqihs that were carrying it could not deduce. So third lesson, just because you understand, and it's not you because, and not even me, I'm not a faqih. Yeah, this is not us. So those who are faqihs, who understand the hadith for what it is and are able to deduce rulings from the Quran and hadith, they sometimes end up relating this to such people who have even greater understanding of this hadith after hearing it. Why? Because they have, for example, they have all the pieces of the jigsaw and you gave them this one, so it was just simple, put the piece over there and they give you the full picture. But they were just missing this one piece. And you didn't have 10 pieces, but you had this one, so you thought you know everything. But when you gave it to them, you found out, I don't know anything. I thought that this jigsaw was a picture of the sun and the moon, and the sea and the ocean, and it meant this and it meant that, but I only had 10 pieces. This person had everything but this one piece, so when I gave it to him, the understanding that he's giving me is something much different. So this hadith I wanted to narrate to you specially as a continuation from last week, just to give you an understanding that a person who memorizes verses of the Quran, verses of the hadith, and let's say verses of or meanings and interpretations as well, what different scholars give, it doesn't make a person a faqih, because faqahat and this understanding is an innate quality, ability, which Allah gives to whomsoever He wishes. You may memorize hadith and you may memorize even the interpretations of what scholars have given upon these hadith and the Quran verses, but you are still conclusively a memorizer. You are still just a memorizer. It doesn't mean you have the ability to deduce rulings from this yourself, which makes a faqih a faqih. Are we all with me? Okay. The two titans that we're going to be discussing the interpretations, and we're going to come across these two titans from amongst the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'een, whom were head to head, neck to neck in terms of this interpretation. Is it kuzibu? Do we read this as qad kuzibu, or do we read this as qad kuzibu? Which one do we read this as? Which one is correct over here? So there were two titans neck to neck over here. One of them was the mother of the believers, the great muhadditha, the esteemed wife of our Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Sayyida Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, whom comes across, if I recall correctly, from the top 5 narrators of the most hadith, the most things about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, amongst from men and women. She's the only woman in the top 5 amongst the men, amongst the Sahabis, if I recall correctly. She's right up there. Right up there. Muhadditha. She's memorized many ahadith and she's passed them on. She's memorized many things about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and she's passed them on to the ummah. So she's on one side. And she says this means qad kudhibu, which means that the prophets, they were rejected. They were rejected by the people. That's what she says. And on the other side, you have Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, who was a young Sahabi at the time of the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, whom says this is qad kudhibu. This is قَدْ كُذِبُوا, that they were not rejected, but they were lied to. Lied to, now again we'll explain what does that mean, lied to, but rejected and lied to is two different things. Rejected means that someone refuses you. Let's say refuse to accept you, you're rejected. So if you say I'm a prophet of Allah, they say we don't accept you. Say believe in this book, I don't even accept you, or the book, reject. And lied means too, that let's say I promised you something and I didn't deliver it, then I lied to you. Yeah. So Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma is saying that this is kudhibu, which means, in one interpretation, we'll get to the details of it, but just so you understand the rough picture, he is saying that here it means, a possible interpretation is that the disbelievers, they said to the prophets and their believers that you have been lied to by Allah, because you said that the punishment of Allah is going to come upon us and there's no punishment here, so Allah lied to you. That's what Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu is saying. And Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu anhu is saying, no, this means kudhibu, that they were rejected. Rejected by who? By the people. This is what it means, kudhibu. It's got nothing to do with that they thought that Allah's help is going to come and didn't come on time, so they got ridiculed by the people. No. How can Allah promise the messengers something and not give it to them? And how can they ever think ill of Allah or bad about Allah or get it wrong? No, they can't get it wrong. They're prophets. And of course, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is amongst the prophets as well. Now, the differences and the details of these interpretations, maybe next week we will do. But today, I just want to finish off the topic of muhaddith, faqih, and mufassir. These three. Muhaddith, a person who memorizes hadith. It's a category of qualification. So you memorize a certain amount of hadith, sanad, and the matan as well, and you pass it on. And a mufassir is a person who's memorized the meanings of the Quran. Mufassir. And a faqih is the one who is a muhaddith, who is a mufassir, and has the ability to take out rulings from this as well. So they are muhaddith, they are mufassir as well. They know the hadith, they know the verses of the Quran, the meanings, and they are able to deduce rulings as well. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, who is this man? Who is this sahabi? Now we're going to skip the physical description, his life and his father Abdullah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, great sahabi as well, the uncle of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We're going to skip all that history, but it's Abbas. We're going to skip that history part, but we're just going to go to who is Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And just some things of his life which show his level in terms of, is he a muhaddith, is he a mufassir, or is he a faqih? So first thing is, at 3 times in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, unlike many other sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'een, he gained du'as of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. On one occasion, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam brought him to himself and squeezed him against his chest and said, Allahumma allimhu al-hikmah. Oh Allah, grant him wisdom. Teach him wisdom. Now grant him wisdom. On another occasion, that's in Sahih Bukhari, another occasion in Sahih Bukhari, the hadith is being mentioned where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam entered the toilet. So he entered toilet meaning like he went to a certain area to relieve himself. And he went without telling anyone he went. But Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, he saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam going. So he thought to himself that I haven't seen Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam going with water, so maybe there's going to come a point where he's going to need water, so he'll have to, as he's going, he'll probably go find water first, and then he'll realize he hasn't got the water, he'll go find it. So let me just take the water and to him and just place it over there, and then I'll just walk away. So he went there, he placed it, he walked away. Then, the water, and again clarification, the water we're talking about is not to relieve himself. The water we're talking about is after having performed and relieved himself of his needs, then he will need to perform wudu. Not to relieve himself for his need, but to perform wudu. So there is no water for wudu over there. So let me go just place this from where he's relieving himself, and then I'll just walk away. So that when he goes after relieving himself looking for the water, then it's just there, so he can just perform his wudu. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam relieved himself. Then after, he was going to look for water, but he finds that the jug of water is already there. So he said, "Man wada'a hadha?" Who's put this over here? So then he was informed, and that it was Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma. So he gave this dua to Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, "Allahumma faqihhu fid deen." Oh Allah, make him a faqih in deen. In the first dua, Allahumma allimhu al-hikmah. Allah, grant him hikmah, teach him hikmah. Give him the ilm of hikmah, of Quran and Sunnah. But in here, Allahumma faqihhu fid deen. Allah, grant him faqaha. Grant him the insight into the matters of deen. Grant him the insight into the matters of the Quran and Hadith. So he can deduce the correct rulings for the correct situation. Oh Allah, make him a faqih. And the third occasion, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was performing his night prayer, the Tahajjud Salah. So Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma saw that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is performing this Tahajjud Salah. So in Nafal Salah there is permission, etc. So he went and he stood next to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and he said, "Allahu Akbar." And he joined him in prayer. So, I'm going to join Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this nafal prayer, and I will get the virtue for this. So he stood a step behind Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that is how we do it. We don't go in level with the Imam, or we don't go in front of him. This breaks the Imam. It breaks the relationship of the leader and the follower. But he's only a kid. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam pulled him forward right next to him. Just come stand next to me. So after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam pulled him forward, he moved back himself. He moved back. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam completed the salah, and he said to Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma that in salah I pulled you forward. Why did you move back? So he said that, "Ya Rasulullah, awa yanbaghi li ahadin an yusalliya hidha'ak wa anta Rasulullah alladhi a'taka Allah." O Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, is it ever appropriate for someone to pray level with you whilst you are the messenger of Allah whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals to? Can it ever befit someone to stand level with you? We're talking about a teenager in his early teens. We're not talking about an adult who's got this. We're talking about this youngster with the Prophet of Allah who's got this understanding at this age. That how can someone ever be level with you? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam upon there and then made dua for him. فَدَعَ اللَّهَ لِي أَن يَزِيدَنِي عِلْمًا وَفَهْمًا. And there and then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made dua for him, and this is a Sahih Hadith, and this is mentioned in Musnad Ahmad. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made dua for him for ilm and fahm, for knowledge and understanding. Again, coming back to the same point, that one is hifz, memorizing. One is knowledge, that you have the knowledge of everything. So you've memorized, and memorized to that extent that you are called a knowledgeable person. You are an alim now. So you know that much about deen. But that still doesn't mean that you have the fahm and the understanding of deen. So you can be a Moulana, you can be an alim, you can be an imam, you can be a sheikh, but that doesn't mean that you have the fahm and the understanding of deen. What it can mean definitely is, what every alim will do, what every Moulana, what every imam, what every sheikh will do, is he will pass on the rulings that he's learned from his teachers to the people. And if something new comes up, then he'll ask his mashayikh and he'll pass on the knowledge to you. So he'll be the conveyor belt. But he may not have the ability, the fahm, to just take it from the Quran and Hadith there and then, or go back and take it from the books and give it to you like that. Because he will be a bearer of the knowledge, but not the person who has the fahm and the understanding of that. So he will just be passing on everything to you. So your needs will be fulfilled by the alim. Every question you go will be answered. So there's nothing to feel like, oh, every Moulana is now insufficient and no one can answer my questions now, so I need to find somebody who is a faqih now in the ummah, and I need to go, on the hunt. No. Every alim will have a connection with a faqih. So he will be able to get the ruling for you. If it's something new, pass it on to you. But we're trying to come to the point over here that an alim doesn't have to be a faqih. And to be a faqih, it is a special ability. And that Allah gives after rigorous effort and work and hard work, mastery of a number of sciences. And then if Allah gives that light in the heart, then this person becomes enlightened. Now he can see through things, meaning he can see past contradiction within the hadith. And he can merge them and he can create solutions. So if this is the case of an alim, then what do you talk about the person who's just picked up a translation from a bookshop of Sahih Bukhari and he's memorized 10 hadith, or he's gone through 10 YouTube videos and he's memorized 10 arguments in 10 masail, and what he can do is he can just convey them to the people. Is he a muhaddith now? Is he a mufassir now? Is he a faqih now? Is he even an alim now? No, he's still a layman, a normal person. And if he begins to challenge a muhaddith, a faqih, a mufassir, an alim, challenge and start to object and start to quarrel, then there is nothing more than we can say that this person's ignorance has reached its peak. That he has no idea that what he has is so little, but yet he feels he has all the ammunition to fire anyone down. But he only knows 1, 2, 3 things. So unfortunately, within our youngsters nowadays, this is a big problem. What is it? It's just like the gym as well. So you go to the gym, you get a little bit of a pump on the bicep so you can see a bit of a cut there, and then you go and think you're the biggest man out there. Oh, I got it. You're young, so your metabolism rate is high, so you see a few 2-packs and 3-packs, then you think that, I've got the best abs in the world. So this person, this youngster, memorizes 3, 4 hadith, learns 4, 5 arguments from a sheikh on a YouTube video, and he thinks, I'm knowledgeable. I know, brother, what I'm talking about. Follow me. Don't follow the people. You've been misguided. You're in bid'at and you're going to Jahannam. And so it's the same scenario. When you're in that young age, you just feel you're on top of the world. So we will conclude, inshallah. We will conclude. Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, he said to Ikrimah, and Ikrimah was the freed slave of Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, Mawlaka, your master, Ikrimah, Wallahi, by the oath of Allah, afqahu man mata wa man asha. He was more faqih than the people that have died and the people that are alive. His faqaha, his understanding about Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas was of this level. And Imam Mujahid rahimullah, a great imam in tafsir, he mentions, Kana ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma yusamma al-bahr. Ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma was called an ocean. Why? Min kathrati ilmihi, because of his extensive knowledge. So not only was he a true alim because he had great ilm, but also through the du'as of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was a great faqih as well. He had fiqh, he had insight as well. So in the interpretations that we will give of Kudhibu next week, you will find that there is an interpretation of Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, and there are interpretations of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma as well. And what do they say? And then what do the people after them say, and base upon the most dominant opinion, and how we can come to that conclusion in terms of tafsir as well. Because in terms of hadith, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she was far ahead in memorization than Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma. He doesn't come close to her in the amount of hadith related. But in terms of tafsir and interpretations of ayat, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma was ahead. And Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha's aqwal, her sayings of this ayah means this, there is nowhere near where Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma's sayings are, and how he passed on this knowledge of the meanings of the ayat. So when two Sahaba clash in terms of interpretations of the Quran, then one of the ways of how the ulama, they come to the conclusion as to what is the final decision in this, or what's the most preferred decision in this, is they look at the tabaqat of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in, the levels of the Sahaba in terms of the field that we're talking about. So if we were talking about the hadith and both of these clashed, then there's a possibility, if it was just purely about chain of narration and hadith as to whether Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this or not, then you would see that the ulama, they would have given preference to say that Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. But when it comes to tafsir, these two have clashed. Then you will see in next week how the ulama have given preference to Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, because he was a master in tafsir, and the work that he has done in terms of memorizing and passing on the meanings of the verses is much more than Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha as well. So inshallah, hopefully today's session has been beneficial in understanding what hifz is, just memorizing something, what a muhaddith is, the person who not only memorizes something but memorizes hadith extensively, and then who a mufassir is, and who knows the interpretations extensively of the Quran, and then who a faqih is, who has the ability given by Allah to take out rulings from the Quran and hadith and give them to the ummah. And next week we will conclude this ayah by going into the different interpretations of Kudhibu, inshaAllah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first will give me, then the rest of you, the ability to act upon this. If you gave me the time I had last week, then I'll go through the interpretations this week, finish them off, and then we'll read the last ayah next week. But I'm not going to push you, inshallah. You sat long enough. Subhanallah bihamdi, subhanallah al-azim, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka.